Happy Sunday. There are a few announcements this morning. Heartwood Monastics will be going to California from August 5th to September 5th to study Importing the Absolute Truth through the Heart Sutra. Anyone interested in coming out to the heart of the Holy Vajrayana Temple to study with us, please go to the following website, www.holyvajrayana.org, for more information and to register. Temple lodging rates are $40 per night for a dorm for 3 to 14 night stay, or $35 per night for a 15 to 30 night stay. The following retreats are coming up. Water fasting retreat with Dr. Maureen Hall from the 13th of June through the 22nd of June, and you can register for that on the website for Heartwood, as well as Taking Refuge with Abhya Darpana, which you can also see on the Heartwood website, and that will be from July 22nd through July 24th. Donations are needed and appreciated. In addition to volunteering, please see the website for needed items. Thank you for all who have offered to help and offered support in the past few months. The Dharma Hall will need to be cleaned Tuesday for the Dharmacharya retreat, which will be starting on Wednesday. For that and other ways that you can help, we have put together a list. There will be a volunteer sign-up list at the front desk on Tuesday. Thank you very much for your love and support. Happy Sunday.
You could just put the microphone right over there for anyone who wants to. Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddha smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. Namo Di Sanchi Doji Chanpo. 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 Hello, friends. I'm pleased to just look out and see everybody's friendly faces for my first Dharma talk. For those online who may not know me, my name is Busita. I'm a novice monastic here at Heartwood. And I'm excited to talk about what I have planned for today. And thinking about what was on my mind and what felt like it could be beneficial to other people and what's been very meaningful for me. I thought of a practice that we've been doing through our Buddha Master, His Holiness Dorje Chung Buddha III, called the Mahamudra of Liberation, the Supreme and Unsurpassable Mahamudra of Liberation. And as part of that, I feel humbled and grateful to be able to talk about part of that practice, which is called the Shifting the Mind practice, which has been very beneficial and meaningful for me. While I'm going to talk about this, it'll be from my perspective. And I would also invite, I know there's several people in the room who have been practicing this Dharma, and I invite you to share any thoughts or comments that you might have as we go forward. So in Learning from Buddha, His Holiness Dorji Chang Buddha III talks about how in Buddhism, the perfect practice of the preliminary practice, main practice, and concluding practice is what Buddha Dharma is. And as part of the Buddha Dharma is the preliminary practice, which in this case, we have the shifting the mind practice, which is part of the preliminary practice for the supreme and unsurpassable Mahamudra of liberation. And he talks about how the power of a Dharma originates from our cultivation. And what I appreciate about the shifting the mind practice is that it is a practice of cultivation. It's not just sitting and meditating. It's looking at how we can bring the Dharma to life. So shifting the mind is a part of cultivation. That's a little shift too that sometimes I don't think about. I think of it as a contemplation practice, but it's actually a cultivation practice. It's a way that we bring it to our day-to-day life, no matter what our life looks like. He also talks about how the power of a Dharma, and in this case, the Mahamudra of liberation, originates from our cultivation. You can see how all of these things connect. I like the way he says this. He says, shifting the mind practice is not a meditation practice. It involves transforming fixed concepts. We don't realize how fixed we get sometimes, but we're very fixed unless we really kind of take a look and be aware of what we're saying and thinking and doing. So transforming fixed concepts into actual deeds. Only when one is proficient in putting concepts into practice can one turn to meditation practice to cultivate the state of not being attached to anything. In cultivating oneself, one must face living beings in real life, face one's own mind and act as the Buddha acted, and take action in a down-to-earth way. I love how he says take action in a down-to-earth way. It hits home. Venerable Panawati talks about this a lot, how, we in the West, we focus on meditation and concentration kind of first, and how, a lot of people find frustration in that, and I certainly have, trying to still my mind and enter emptiness. Before I've done the real legwork of cultivation and development of virtue. And she talks about how in the Noble Eightfold Path, mindfulness and concentration are the last two things. So while this is preliminary of the preliminary practice, which is part of a full Buddha Dharma practice, it can also stand alone, and it can take us a long way. I know several of us who have been practicing this Dharma have just focused on this part of it because it has so much to offer and it's so rich. So the shifting the mind practice is called the Shaman Most Excellent Oceanic Mind Essence. I was like, ooh, that's cool. I love that word essence. I wonder what the definition of essence is. So I actually looked it up. It says the most important aspect of something, the intrinsic or indispensable qualities that serve to characterize something, the inherent unchanging nature of a thing or class of things. This is the essence. It's the thing that kind of just like pervades everything within this, our mind essence. Another thing I was thinking about, I think sometimes within the practices that we've been exposed to recently, it can feel a little exotic or unfamiliar. But what I've learned in doing my own research and study is that it's actually, there's elements of within the Mahamudra of liberation and specifically shifting the mind practice, there's elements in all of Dharma across lineages in the Pali Canon. If you're familiar with it, some Tibetan and Vajrayana teachings, then you'll see some of these elements in the Nagandra practice and in the Lam Rim. You see about this precious human life. You hear about impermanence. You see these things illustrated throughout the Dharma. So it's foundational. So one of the things that I was thinking about as I sit here in my morning practice, I do, I include that as part of my contemplation going into the main practice. And it's just so rich. There's so much to think about. And another thing is that I've just been kind of looking more at, and I welcome conversation today, is just how do you really put this into practice? I think contemplation, you're really thinking about how do you embody it? How do you feel it in your body? How do you make it feel real? That this life is a dream, for example. We'll start with that one. Shifting the mind practice, starting with the dream. So what does the dream even mean? You know, when you, this life is a dream, it's not the way you think it is. Well, some of my thoughts about that were that, you know, I think we're conditioned and we learn from a very young age that I am Rachel, you know, that's Joe, that's Susan, I'm a mom, I'm a manager, I'm whatever it might be. It's like a permanent separate self. I'm you, I'm me, and you're you. And it's just something we take for granted. We don't even think about it. We just kind of embody it. We move from that place. And so when someone upsets us, we react from that instinctive place. We're just, you hurt me. So waking up to that dream that we're a permanent separate self. And it's, I mean, the dream seems like one of the most richest parts of this whole shifting the mind practice, because there's just so many ways that you can kind of think about it and look at it. One of them is what kind of like, well, codependent or dependent arising, we were kind of talking about a little bit with Joe and dependent origination, but just the fact that this body couldn't exist without so many other things. It couldn't exist without oxygen. It couldn't exist without food and shelter, and where the food comes from, and the people that grow it, and the bees that fertilize the flowers that, you know, that helps the food grow. It's just unfathomable the number of causes that have to be in place for the condition of this person and that person and that person to exist. So that is one way to think about the dream. I love the words that he uses in this Dharma. He uses the word, not just dream, but illusion, rainbow, bubble, shadow, morning dew, flash of lightning, mirage. So I think about those. What do they have in common? One, they all depend on something else to exist. Another is that they're quick, they're fast. They come and they go, they rise and then fall. You see it and then you don't. And I think it is, maybe it's the learning from Buddha. He talks about, think about how flowing water and sound never reappear. That's another way that I like to think about this. Because, you know, you think about it, there's a little, you're looking at a river and you see the water go by. So that little piece of water is never going to come back, but the water is still there. Sound, like the sound I'm making right now, this particular sound at this particular moment in this particular way will never reappear, but sound is still sound. I think about my life, you know, I went to Asheville yesterday and saw my ex-husband, and we went out to lunch and we walked my dog Lucy along Carrier Park, and I'm just filled with associations, you know, memories, associations. It's nice. It felt good. We walked down to the Greenway until we got to Hominy Park, where, you know, it's just such a beautiful day yesterday. People were out there in the river, in their boats, having drinks, sitting in the sun, dogs in the water, throwing the stick for our dog. And I'm just remembering all the other times that we did that. And I'm remembering, you know, we had a 20 years relationship, and it's very sweet. We have a very good relationship now, but it's almost like a dream, you know. Everything in the past, there's nothing left to it. It's like sand just falls through your hands. There's nothing left to it. When I think about my childhood, doesn't that feel like, when you think about your childhood, that was just another life? It could be another life. It's removed from this particular moment. So really thinking about that, and not just coming from an autopilot place, but just thinking, okay, yeah. And what makes up those memories is associations and causes that come from an unfathomable and myriad number of other causes that create that moment. So, you know, the way I remember things, is, what does he use? I think he uses a word, almost contaminates the purity of the experience. You know, it's never just pure as long as my thinking mind is involved. So that's kind of the dream too. We got to wake up to that. Like everything I'm thinking is constructed based on so many things, and it's not really real. So a line I like is, we see things as we are, not as they are. Kind of a similar thing to what I was just saying. An image I have when I'm contemplating the dream is walking forward, just walking straight, and the kind of the ground crumbling behind me, because there's really nothing left to it. There's nothing in the future. There's nothing in the past, except for memory and association and conditioning, which is contaminated. So really all there is right this moment, right this moment. And I've said this a couple of times, but it just seems so important on this path just to stop, because we move forward, we accumulate things, we pay attention to the messages we're getting, and they're strong messages. I mean, these are everywhere we look, on media, in our conversations, in social media. Oh my gosh, this is this is very powerful stuff. That we need to buy things and have things and live here and have this job and have this success. And even, from a young age, I remember family members and cousins and stuff feeling like they're not doing life right if they didn't go to college, figure out what they wanted to do. And I was like this too. Have the right job, find a spouse at the right time, perhaps have children, find success in your job, make enough money, so we just kind of go from that place because that's what we're told to do. And that's the fixed part that we're talking about. But we have such a wonderful opportunity here in this practice to just question that and say, well, really? What is that anyway? Who says that? What does that mean? Where does that come from? One of the transmissions that Venerable got from His Holiness Buddha Master is one of the ways to kind of undermine that sense of self, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit too, is real self-inquiry. When we have these thoughts, feelings, reactions to things, where is that coming from? What was that? Usually it relates to something else that we experienced that was similar, and we can even track that back. And oftentimes it's a memory from a childhood situation. But then once you really realize what it is, you're like, oh, it just kind of dissolves. It's so cool when you can actually do that. Yeah, I was walking on the walking path yesterday, and with Gordon and my dog Lucy, and we were walking through this area where there was an RV park kind of thing. And a woman was backing, she was trying to park her RV, and she was blocking the whole walking path. And I noticed I had a moment of like, oh gosh, what irritation. And then I was like, wait a minute. I felt a little shame about that. I was like, well, what was that? Why do you feel irritation? Because then she poked her little head out of the window and was like, I was just going to say you might have to go around, and she was trying really hard to park this RV with this trailer on it. So it just made me think about, that instinctual response that's coming from somewhere. I wasn't able to track that back to its origin, but you get the idea. And then understanding and taking a second to consider what are the other things going on. Maybe she's not just trying to be rude and block my path and not really giving a care. Maybe she's really trying hard to park that thing. It's her first time doing it. She's, there's so many things that we don't consider that could be at play in any given situation. And we make assumptions. It's easy to make assumptions. So he talks about with the dream that people die and never return. Everyone becomes a dream to us. So that's part of the dream too. People that come into our lives and we love them and they pass away from our lives. That can be really hard because, you know, they're such a fixture in our lives. And once they're gone, they really only exist in our memory. So they also become a dream to us. And one of the benefits of knowing this about the dream is that we do get to practice saying, you know, practice acknowledging that everything passes away, including ourselves, and preparing for that so that it's not such a shock and it's not so jarring when they do go. I love the idea of time being a successive series of births and deaths. Like every moment is a birth and death. Every moment is a culmination of causes that in some causes lead to the condition of the next moment. Not every cause leads to the condition of the next moment. Some things don't continue into the next moment. But that's what time is. It's just events with the cause to move into the next moment. So that is a helpful way to think of, I think, of birth and death and the dream, is that it's not a continuous, unbroken thing. It's myriad causes moving into the condition of the next moment. So how do we put the dream into practice? You know, how do we walk that out? First, anybody have any thoughts about how they do that? Sure. Take the microphone.
Like you, the preliminary practices, you know, penetrating that idea that this life is a dream is a major focus of mine. And I find that I get help. I get directed to various pieces of information, whether it's a YouTube video or sometimes a book, that kind of help me to see the essence of, maybe in some cases, like this one book I'm reading is a scientific book, but it's about the essence of, you know, this form world that we live in and the physical world that we live in. What is it really, according to quantum physics? You know, it's to the point where we don't teach quantum physics in school like we do regular physics, and we haven't since it was discovered in the 1900s, because it's kind of earth shattering. It's kind of mind shattering to the idea that, you know, these physical forms we see are not really quite as physical as we think they are. But so this is my way, as a scientific sort of, you know, engineering kind of background kind of person. I encounter this kind of information, and it helps me to sort of, you know, place my mind into a place where I can kind of, you know, start to maybe mistrust a little bit what I'm seeing. The idea that, you know, when a bird whistles, we hear it as a continuous stream of sound, but the birds around them hear it, because their hearing processes at a different rate than ours, as a series of pulses. And so, you know, and they see at a much faster rate than we do, and they're able to process visual information so much faster because they have to fly and make decisions on the fly. So their system of seeing is different than ours. So what do we really see? So these are all the kinds of things that helped inform me, at least, in terms of, you know, how do I penetrate this idea that this life is a dream? So a developing story for sure, but it's a big focus of mine as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That's such a wonderful example, and one that I also think about. Like, you know, we take for granted that the world is as we experience it with our five senses, but there are so many beings that we can't see with our five senses that you don't think about until you start thinking about it. Some people are able to, and we learn a lot from them. And like you're saying, like even other beings that are material in form that we see have a very different experience of the same reality.
Hi, Busita. First, thank you so much this is a great talk. I have the opportunity to work with children who are kind of in their own little space often between significant cognitive and sensory impairments and severe to moderate autism, which is a great teacher in its own right, because you can kind of see the world through a different lens if you can channel into it. And what I tell staff members when they become frustrated, because my kids can have some behavioral concerns sometimes, and it really does go back to my practice, is take yourself out of the equation. And that is my tagline, is take yourself out of the equation. Just back away and take yourself out of it. This is not about you. And then I realized that's really actually part of the practice. It wasn't necessarily intentional to have come from my practice, but it really is when there's really no you there to react and you simply respond. It's very much cultivating everything that we've done. And Joe, when you were talking about the physics and the quantum physics, I kind of see the world as those little fragmented pieces. I'm going to date myself, but if anyone remembers those books, the flip books that you would take and you would just flip it, and it was almost like one piece of picture after another and after another and after another. But when you flip the book together, it appeared as if it was moving in one solitary unit, but realistically, it was all just moment by moment by moment by moment by moment, and how your mind and how your processing was able to piece it together. And how, like, in retrospect, I can look at that and go, that's kind of what life is like. It's just moment by moment by moment, all put together into this grand illusion, as Rush would say, that we call our lives. But realistically, it's just the way that we're perceiving it right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Yeah, thank you. So a couple other things that I had thought about that, Elsie, I'll come right to you in just a second, is how to put this into practice was one, continuous reflection, really doing this every day, and not just in the morning on your cushion, but like reminding yourself. Sometimes I'll be walking around the lake and I'll be like, this is just a dream, So just reminding yourself throughout the day. And what I'd mentioned earlier is self-inquiry, really kind of tracking back where the thoughts, feelings, and actions that we engage in come from. Open up to the possibility that things are not what they seem and question things. Releasing grip on things. We hold on to things so tightly. Maybe we can just like loosen up a little bit and consider what's really going on there. And then don't cut off anything. I love the way he says this in the practice. He says, in the Mahamudra of Liberation, he says, don't cut off anything, everything exists. Don't abiding in nothing is true thusness, something like that. So the way I think of that is don't grab the rope and get pulled down the hallway. Just don't grab the rope. Just see the rope. Elsie, you wanted to say something?
Very useful in the shifting the mind practice for myself is when I first started doing the practice, I listened to the talk by Zazie, and then and did that for a number of days every day. And then as time went on, what was really helpful for me with the shifting the mind practice is the ability to tap into that when I would have a particular emotion, like a reaction. And so typically it's like not a good one when I notice to do it. And so, so as I notice it, then I get the opportunity to take a look and see who's reacting. What is it that is reacting? Who is the I? Who is the me? Who is that? And then really, really get to sit with that and then start doing the comparisons. Well, is the I my body? Is the I my mind? Is the, like, who is the I? And really, really sitting with that for a while. And what happens after I do that is it starts to lose its grasp and it starts to disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really helpful for me. And I do it, now I just do it in every day, whatever I'm doing every day. when I get a chance, particularly when it's something that feels kind of sticky. And then I get the opportunity. And the more I do it, the faster I can do it. Like it's not a step by step by step anymore. It's just like an automatic. And the reality is that it's not real.
Yeah,
That's the great part of it. It's just not real.
so beautiful. Yeah, Patrul Rinpoche, there's something I listened to that he wrote that talks about how finding the true nature of mind. He says, just settle into the one who thinks, settle into the one who questions. And when you do that, you're like, oh, there's nothing there. And you just kind of settle into your true nature of awareness. It's so wonderful. So there's so many other things here, and we've just gotten to the dream. So the next is precious human birth. And I just really reflect on this one a lot too. And I know a lot of you all do. Being in this situation that we're in right now in particular, I know that we often all feel a lot of gratitude and awareness of just how precious it is. So it's wonderful to me that all Buddhas, every Buddha has attained enlightenment through a human life. This is where we do it. Yay. There's a couple things that are reference cause that, which is how are we born human? Well, we're born human and just understanding and having appreciation for the fact that we had virtue in our past lives that allowed us this particular moment. So just understanding that relationship between positive action and positive effects. So we're here because we were good somewhere along there in that mental continuum, and we can continue to work from that place of understanding cause and effect and doing good for the benefit of all, and continuing to find the circumstances that allow us to continue to practice until we achieve enlightenment. Numbers, this is a cool one to me too. Just thinking about like the number of human lives in comparison to the lives of all other beings. They say in the teachings that hell beings are the most numerous, which breaks my heart. In one teaching, he talks about just picking up a clod of earth and just seeing all the little microorganisms in that clod of earth and realizing, there's not a whole lot of humans in comparison to all the other little beings that exist in even the most microscopic ways. So really understanding the value and the rarity of a human birth in general. We've all heard the sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya about the turtle and the yolk. That's, I think, a really good illustration of how rare it is to be born a human as well. I looked up just, some more information about this precious human birth, because I know that it's described quite a lot in especially the Lam Rim. And so the Lam Rim talks about how the nature part of this is that as a human, there's 8 special freedoms and 10 special endowments that make it an ideal opportunity for achieving enlightenment as a human in this life. So I'll share them with you real quick. One is being born, freedom from being born as a hell being. Yes, that is good. Or a hungry spirit. I think about this a lot, and I know when we have times when we're sick, or some people have come down with COVID, or have a back ache or whatever it is, an injury, an illness, like we see people have all the time, and we experience ourselves, and that when you're in that space, like, I can't practice, I don't feel good, I just can't concentrate, I'm too tired, so you think about that and you're like, well, in the hell realms, or in the hungry ghost realms, their discomfort is so continuous and pervasive that it's pretty near impossible to practice and achieve any results in those realms. So we have freedom from that. We have freedom from being born as an animal, where they're really working from an instinctual level. I see a little Bodhi cat, and he's, in many ways, he reminds me of a little bodhisattva. He is teaching us in so many ways, like equanimity and unconditional love, but he's a killer. He brings me little things all the time. I was just the other night, he caught 2 mice in my room, or brought them in there or something. But he's so, we have freedom from the ignorance, because he's operating from instinct, and doesn't have the opportunity to reflect on the effect of that action. And then gods, they're either living in kind of a blank space or or such an ideal and comfortable space that they really don't have the suffering that, one, helps them want to practice, and two, helps them have a deeper level of compassion for others who suffer. Freedom from being born and remaining in a country where there is no religion or no opportunity to meet a spiritual guide. Freedom from being born and remaining in a country where there is no Buddha Dharma. Freedom from being born and remaining with mental or physical disabilities, similar to what we were talking about before. Freedom from holding wrong views, denying Dharma. For example, the view that past and future lives don't exist, or any kind of dogmatic view that absolutely says this isn't possible. There's lots of places like that. And we're seeing it more and more, actually, in lots of realms. And then the 10 endowments, the things that help us, are being born human, being born and remaining in a country where Dharma is flourishing, being born and remaining with complete powers free from mental and physical disabilities, not having committed any of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, killing mother, father, arahant, intentionally harming a Buddha, causing division or disharmony within the Sangha or Dharma community. Those are apparently so egregious that you'll end up in a hell realm. Having faith in the 3 sets of Buddha's teachings, taking human rebirth in a world where Buddha has appeared. And in this case, we have not only, we live in a world where Shakyamuni Buddha has appeared and has taught and then, continued the lineage of teachings through thousands of years, but we have the appearance of His Holiness Buddha Master, who's considered an incarnation of the primordial Buddha. Taking human rebirth in a world where Buddha has taught Dharma, taking rebirth in a world where pure Dharma is still being taught, taking rebirth in a world where there are people practicing pure Dharma. And again, pure, correct. That seems like, His Holiness makes such a distinction about that because, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute too, but the pure, correct Dharma is so important, or you could get waylaid and spend a whole lot of time going in the wrong direction. Taking rebirth in a world where there are benefactors and sponsors for Dharma practitioners. And so not only that, but, we have each other. We have Venerable Panawati, we had Venerable Panyadipa teaching us not only in word, but in how they live, in an example. It's been so powerful, and I know we're all so grateful. I mean, it's truly a gift, truly a gift. Human birth is so special because we can generate huge amounts of merit through our positive actions. I have a book that Venerable had brought in here one time and I ordered, called The Joyful Path of Good Fortune, based on the Lamrim. And that's written by Geshe Kelsang Gyatso. And in that book, he says we can generate the same amount of merit in 1 hour that a God creates in 1 eon. If we meditate on love for just 5 minutes or make just one prostration to our spiritual guide, regarding him or her as an emanation of all the Buddhas, we will create immeasurable merit. So, again, the worldly way of looking at things is everything will be great if I win the lottery, or if I, get this pile of jewels or whatever it might be. But actually, we have the most good fortune that one could have, because this is going to impact not just this life, but future lives and many other people who we come in contact with. The next mind essence, or the next shifting the mind practice of contemplation, is that true Dharma is now available. And again, this is just so wonderful to me that, we, from what we understand and what the Buddha Master has said, he incarnated in this life to help correct mistakes in the Dharma. That, you think about it, I used to work at a managed care company. And then my job was to help interpret and enforce the clinical coverage policies governing Medicaid spending for mental health, substance use, and disability services. Isn't it? But you learn in all these things just how much, like, even if you are, these clinical coverage policies were really, they tried really hard to write it without any room for questioning or, differences in perspective. It's like, this is the way it is. But it doesn't matter how anything is written, there will be people that perceive it differently and will argue that. So all that to say, there's bound to be some errors in translation and in how the Dharma was transmitted across time. So he came to correct some of those errors, and we are the fortunate beneficiaries of receiving the corrections that we can then apply. So true Dharma. He says this Dharma is difficult to encounter in millions of eons. So how do we put that into practice? The way I thought about it is gratitude and devotion, really. Real gratitude for the situation that we're in, where we have learned the true Dharma, the correct Dharma, directly, pretty much from an incarnation of the primordial Buddha. I mean, when I say that out loud, it just feels ridiculously impossible, but here it is. So the next one is death and impermanence and the sufferings of samsara. We all say, oh, I know I'm going to die. And this is one that still doesn't really feel real to me necessarily. I mean, I think about it. It's part of my contemplation. And apparently it's one of the most important things that a person can do. It is to really dwell on the nature of impermanence every day. That's one of the most effective things that we can do to help us then commit, practice, not put off, our Dharma practice. So just really understanding that we can die at any time. Sickness and things like that are actually so helpful in that regard, because they get us to think about that. And when we lose others, it's actually also a helpful reminder while painful. And something else that occurs is just that, and that he talks about in this mind essence, is that we really can take nothing with us. And just remembering that, especially in the accumulation of things, we take nothing with us except for the effects, the unfruited effects of our thoughts, words, and deeds. Whew. Makes you want to be careful. And just remembering that not only will we die, but everyone we love will die. I have an identical twin sister, and this is probably the most strong attachment that I have in this life. We don't talk every day or anything, but she is a great lesson for me of thinking about that, and in separation, there's been many times in our relationship where we've intentionally separated from each other, knowing that we kind of had to do our own thing. And I'm grateful for that then and now, because while I love her as much as a person can love another person, I know that she can't go with me when I go. This is, we're going to have to separate now or later. My nieces, the rest of my family, my friends, my Dharma friends, everybody, we're going to have to say goodbye to each other. So getting used to that idea now, how powerful that is. And we've taught, Venerable has talked about this too. If we pass away holding on, that really impacts what happens next. You think about that with hungry ghosts in particular. They're holding on to something that they, and we hear about like addiction and hungry ghosts wanting craving, but I think it's more than just those types of craving. It's holding on to people. It's holding on to places. I think that's potentially why we have spirits in this home. They're holding on to this place. So being able to say goodbye now, so that we're not stuck in a ghost realm, trying to work with that. And just knowing that, with impermanence, we have and the nature of samsara in particular, what we want to free ourselves from, we have no control over where we go next. It could be anywhere, and that we don't know where the karma from our past lives is going to mature, which could, take us to, an unfortunate realm where we can't practice Dharma. I love what Venerable says, what we think and ponder on becomes the inclination of our mind. So just, and that when we're dying, what we're thinking of is kind of instinctual. as we're going through that process, Soma and I both took a training that Pema Chodron did on the Bardos and the process of death. And she talks about that, how when you're in the Bardo, you don't say, oh yeah, wait, I'm supposed to go towards the bright light, even though it feels too bright. I'm not supposed to go towards the cozy light. Like you can't make that decision. You're going to move where your habit is, where you're used to moving towards. So if you're used to moving towards uncomfortable places, she says, then that's going to help you. So really integrating and becoming natural in the ways that we experience things will help us at that moment of death and in the Bardo. The inevitability of karmic retribution, and just really understanding the nature of cause and effect. This is another one, isn't it? Where it just feels like kind of theoretical. You're trying to put it together, but paying attention, you really kind of start to see some relationships. You start to feel a little loosening, like you were saying, Elsie. Just one of the things I've noticed about just this whole practice of shifting the mind is that going into it, it felt very intellectual and formulaic almost. And I was really having to kind of push to think about it and feel it. And sometimes I still do. But I'm starting to see some integration into the rest of my life and the way I think about things. It has power. So cause and effect. I have a little bit of an interest. He says no divination or astrology. It's so fun though. But that undermines the idea of cause and effect. So not getting too trapped in that, there might be some kind of, I don't know, relationship there, but really the main thing is cause and effect. He says the only way out is to diligently, courageously, and vigorously cultivate the mind and conduct, uphold precepts, and arouse bodhicitta as far as karmic retribution. Carrying out good acts, large and small. Another thing he talks about is only assisting others in good actions. That's something that really takes a lot of mindfulness and awareness too, because it can be so easy, like even in a situation where you mean well, you want to kind of help support somebody and they're suffering and they're mad at somebody and you're like, yeah, that wasn't cool. That's assisting somebody in negative karmic retribution. So really you want to help kind of ground in dharmic principles. You don't maybe put it in those words, but really just those little things are great opportunities to remember. That if we're encouraging someone else to engage in anger or that kind of thing, that's breaking basically a bodhisattva vow. Our own karmic conditions and cutting off attachment to self. One of his Holiness's discourses that became made available to us recently on Master Zazi Zuma's website was cutting off attachment. Oh no, wait, that wasn't on her website. This was one that Venerable read to us, but cutting off attachment to self. Being one of the first and most necessary aspects to dharmic practice. That's kind of a tall order too, isn't it? So I've thought about that a lot. How do you do that? What does that mean? What does that look like in practice? In the 128, I think it is, evil and erroneous views, that is part of the Mahamudra of liberation. Buddha Master talks about how the foremost way to uproot a sense of self is to put others' needs before your own. Not that hard. I think that's a great thing to think about, and I try to carry that into my daily life. It takes, like everything, all of us, really continuous mindfulness and awareness and effort, practice of the paramitas. But also, when we're having those responses, those feelings, thoughts, and actions, saying, what is this? Who is this? Where does this come from? Like Elsie, you were saying too, that helps to kind of get rid of this false sense of self. And Saving self for others. I love just asking the question, what would a Buddha or Bodhisattva do? As in my practice as a mental health counselor, I would struggle sometimes trying to help other people, feeling like in my experience, mental health work wasn't going all the way. I think Dharma does. But two is just knowing I had my own work to do. And that's just such a good lesson. You know, you really can't truly help other people until you really look at your own stuff, work it out, take the time. So that's our job, to save ourselves so we can save other people. His Holiness talks about, this is one of my favorite parts of this mind essence. He says, Dharma can be summarized into 2 words. And I think it's a good kind of encapsulation of all of this. Cause and effect. Dharma can be summarized into cause and effect. So really knowing that. To transform those 2 words, these 5 words, continuous shifting the mind practice. Okay. And the beneficial effects of those 5 words are these 6 words: loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and unhindered mastery. This is the usefulness of all of Buddhism. Out of this arises prajna, realization of emptiness, true thusness, dharmakaya. We realize all of this through the merit generated through loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and unhindered mastery. So we are really lucky to have this teaching and to know how to kind of integrate it into our daily life, not just to contemplate it, but to act it out, to think about it, to do things coming from that place. We have such an opportunity, especially here with each other. So wonderful. So we have a little bit more time. If anybody else wants to share anything about this practice or their experience with this practice, the floor is open.
I feel very fortunate, Pusita, for bringing this in, as I have been, I tend to come from a skeptic sensibility. And it took time to just get the lineage as Panawati and Panyadipa were first introducing it to me. In that time, they finally showed me enough. I finally cultivated enough benefits and had many successes. And now that we're moving into the Buddha Master's iteration of the Buddhist ways, I'm listening to this final part of, oh my gosh, it's just so easy and it's so simple. Only the application of it is not. And that, I think, is the practice on a daily basis of knowing that that's just what you're going to need to do. I'm going to need to do. And I'm grateful that I have Sangha, because one of the things about being in a Sangha is that you are familiar with what we are doing. We all have a grounding. We have some foundation from which we're all coming from to relate to one another as we're practicing. It's different when you're in the other world. When you're in the householder world and you're in the world applying it to others who are not Buddha minded, then that's the where I call it sister suchness, and Clear Grace taught me about the chopsticks and the ego rubbing. That's where I end up doing more work in the householder other world than as much as I do with my Sangha members in the Buddha world. So thank you.
Maya, I appreciate what you said. And I think this is where, after being in the Dharmacharya program for a year plus now, and just the phenomenal opportunity to have that with Panawati and with Panadipa. The understanding and the walking the whole thing out, Maya, this goes to what you said, as a true exemplar. I mean, for me, I wear that every day when I'm confronted with what it is happens outside of this beautiful Sangha, because you're right, there's this beautiful little refuge bubble in our small group. But when you're walking it out in the world and not everybody is seeing through that same lens, to be able to be an exemplar for all of those that are around us, whether they have a belief in Buddhism or Allah or nothing or Judaism or Christianity, just to be an exemplar of what we've learned, with no attachment or to holding or judgment of where they're from, but just to be an exemplar in every opportunity and everything that we do, with complete freedom of no giver, no receiver, no action, just simply that next right step. So thank you.
Lucita, I just wanted to thank you for providing such a comprehensive and detailed overview of what we're trying to learn and what we've been learning the past year. You know, the only thing I would say is, you know, I do try to stay as close to all of you as I can and immerse myself each day, you know, in the Dharma and through just trying to be very disciplined, both in habits and in heart. And then when I have to leave and be with crazy family and all of that, I just recognize that, you know, there's just a few things: say less, big for me, be present and see things as they are. If there's opportunity where I can, you know, be of some value, be of some value. If you can't, then just keep praying. But wanted to thank you for today. Really was, you really helped take some of these high flown spiritual principles. You helped drive them home in my heart. And I'm grateful to you for that. Thank you.
Anyone else before we close? All right. All of the merit from our discussion, contemplation, and practice today, we dedicate entirely to living beings in the 6 realms. May we quickly realize the unimpeded state. May all our fathers and mothers in the 6 realms, without exception, forever enjoy ultimate bliss and endless longevity. May we all realize holy enlightenment that never ends. Thank you, everybody.